to welcome everybody, my dear brothers and sisters, for the second night of Fatimiyya that we have. And I would like to announce also for tomorrow is going to be our last day of Fatimiyya. Tomorrow night we'll start at 7 o'clock with prayers, and it's going to be in Farsi. دوستان محترم، آقایان عزیز، خانمای محترم، ضمن عرض تسلیت به همه شما بزرگواران به مناسبت شهادت مظلومانه سیده جهانیان حضرت فاطمه زهرا و خوش آمدگویی به همه شما بزرگواران. فردا شب آخرین برنامه فاطمیه این مسجد خواهد بود. مجلس ما برای فردا شب انشالله به پایان خواهد رسید. از شما همه دعوت میشه که انشالله فردا تشریف بیارید، در خدمتتون باشه. Tonight is the anniversary of passing away of our dear brother Yasai's family, actually the family of Yasai's mother, سرکار خانم جنت مکان حاجی خانم سعادت یاسایی, and we would like to express our condolences to this honorable family, to all the children and the grandchildren, as well as all the people who have some relationship with this good family. We're going to start our program with the recitation of the Holy Quran, and if you would like to follow with me, I'm going to recite from Surah Al-An'am, Surah Al-Imran. Ayah number 191 and maybe 4 or 5 ayah, we'll see. صلى على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا
ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. فاستجاب لهم ربهم أني لا أضيع عمل عامل منكم من ذكر أو أنثى بعضكم من بعض الذين هاجروا وأخرجوا من ديارهم وأوذوا في سبيلي وقاتلوا وقتلوا لأكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم ولأدخلنهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ثوابا من عند الله والله عنده حسن الثواب. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
For the pure soul of Our Lady, Sarkar Khanum Hajiye Saadati Yasai, please let's all recite Surah Al-Fatiha preceded by loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. صدق الله العظيم. I'd like to thank all of you for attending tonight, especially for the anniversary of passing away of our sister, the mother of the Yasai family. One announcement to the things that we said earlier. We would love to see your children with you and attending these. And I always say that it's so important for us to bring our children, especially these days and nights, to understand and to learn about the Ahlul Bayt and what happened to our Imams, and to commemorate these days. And so inshallah that will be in their cells as they grow up. And the love of Ahlul Bayt is going to be definitely be a seed as they grow up. That seed will definitely produce many blessings in the future. But one thing I wanted to mention, please, sisters and brothers, to keep them as quiet as possible so all of us will benefit. And those who would like to talk to their children or something, there's a room right next door, and if you open the door just a bit, you can still hear the speech as well. So if you want to, either me or Brother Mashtaba, or you can also open the door, you can get in there, inshallah, and then we would love to see you all here again and again. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow. Please invite Sayyid Mahdi al-Qazvini to the podium with the last salawat.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. قال الله في كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: كلا نمد هؤلاء وهؤلاء من عطاء ربك وما كان عطاء ربك محظورا. صدق الله العلي العظيم، وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. In chapter number 17 of the Quran, Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of the gifts that He has bestowed upon us as humanity. And there's a special word that's used here, and that is the word ata. كُلًّا نُمِدُّ هَؤُلَاءِ وَهَؤُلَاءِ مِنْ عَطَاءِ رَبِّكَ. And the previous verses describe the people who strive in the way of God. Meaning that those who do strive in the way of God in whatever capacity, because all of us are endowed with capacities, and sometimes we tend to compare ourselves with others, not only on the level of our results, but also on the level of our capacity. So on the level of input and on the level of output. And God reminds us that whoever strives in His way, in whatever capacity, they will be granted His gifts. The word is ata. And ata in Arabic literally means offering. An offering. But in the context of God, it refers to a gift. And that word gift is mentioned 3 times in the Quran. 2 of those times, God tells us that His gifts, or His capacity to give gifts and grant, is unlimited. And this verse is one example. وَمَا كَانَ عَطَاءُ رَبِّكَ مَحْظُورًا. That the gifts that your God gives are not limited. They're not prohibited in any way. And if you remember, a few weeks ago actually, we spoke about some of the gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed every human being with, and how most of the time we live our lives never discovering what our gifts are. Most of them are unopened. In the same way that, sometimes you're cleaning out your house, you're cleaning out your closet, and you realize there are certain gifts that maybe someone gave you 6 months ago, or 6 years ago, or 10 years ago, that have just been sitting there. And you never opened them. Now, the fact that you did not open them and you did not discover them, that doesn't decrease the value of the gift. That doesn't mean that the gift was not there. That doesn't mean that the gift will not bring you joy. In fact, it might even bring you more joy. Sometimes you realize that there's something that you've put away for so long that when you uncover it, it gives you even more joy. The moment that you uncover it, the moment that you discover it. So there are a number of gifts that God gives every single one of us that strive in His way, in whatever capacity. And whatever capacity that we do strive for God, it's accepted. I think sometimes we really complicate things. We think that there's only a certain way to earn God's satisfaction. And the keys to earning God's satisfaction belongs to this person or that person. And there's some sort of secret. Yes, there are certain things that God wants us to do, certain obligations that God wants us to fulfill, but that doesn't mean that there is no other way. I mean, sometimes we kind of limit our imagination and our creativity in bringing happiness to people and making God happy and satisfied with us in the process. Now that doesn't mean we we intentionally abandon the obligations that God has set forth and say, well, I'm going to do this instead. But we need to understand that in whatever capacity that we give, that we strive in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that will be accepted. And one of those gifts we mentioned, if you remember, is freedom. What does that mean? That means that if you look at our actions, our behaviors, between the time that we are stimulated to the time that we react, there's a space. Now, people who, have not mastered the ability to, for instance, control their temper, that space is very, very small. So as soon as someone agitates them, as soon as someone or something stimulates them, they react right away. Whereas if you've noticed people who have developed patience and forbearance, it's not that they're not bothered by anything, but that they've trained themselves in a way that they don't react suddenly. They wait. And we have many, many examples. The famous story we're told of Imam Ali alayhi salam when he was in the battlefield and he waited to react before that man insulted him by spitting in his face. It's not that he wasn't bothered by it. Of course he was bothered by it. And of course he carried out the mission. That didn't stop him either. But he gave himself chance to rest because he was a man of patience and forbearance. So those are some of the gifts that God gives us. One of them is freedom. And gifts are God's sign of affection towards us. What does that mean? See, we're taught, for instance, we're told that in Christian theology, God is described as love. They say God is love. Now, in Islamic thought, we don't say God is love. We say God is loving. And Al-Wadud, the affectionate, is one of God's 99 names. And so the word love doesn't really, if you look at the Quran, in all of the 114 chapters, the word love, hub in Arabic, it doesn't really appear that many times. But the actions that are associated with love appear many times in the Quran. The Quran is replete with the actions that are associated with love, such as what? Sacrifice. That's something that is associated with love. Empathy. Communication. Those are all things that are associated with love. And if you remember, a few weeks ago, we mentioned that love is a verb. It's not just a feeling. We treat love, and you look at how love is taught today, and Hollywood, glamorizes love as it's this tingly feeling that you're supposed to feel for someone, and that you can't sacrifice for someone unless you feel a certain way about them. But that's not the case. You can still sacrifice for someone, even if you don't necessarily feel something for them right away. You can still communicate with someone, or empathize with someone, or sympathize for someone, even if you don't necessarily feel something right away. And if you do that enough times, eventually, love, the feeling, will be produced out of love, the verb. So, God gives us a gift, or many gifts, and His gifts are a way of Him showing His affection towards us. One way that you show your affection towards people is by giving gifts. If you're familiar with the concept of the love languages, some people, their love language is receiving gifts. Meaning that the way that they feel that their love tank is full is when you give them a gift. And if you have someone in your life, a spouse, a parent, a sibling, because love is also not just a romantic love, but it's that intense feeling of affection. You know that if you have that person, that family member or that loved one whose love language is receiving gifts, you can do everything for that person except give them gifts, and they're not going to feel love. They might appreciate it, but men, if your wife's love language is receiving gifts, and you could vacuum the ceiling if you want, that's not going to make any difference unless you give them what they're looking for. So God, His way of showing His affection towards us is by giving us gifts. And that's what He says. And not only does He give us gifts, but the nature of His gifts are unlimited. كُلًّا نُمِدُّ هَؤُلَاءِ وَهَؤُلَاءِ مِنْ عَطَاءِ رَبِّكَ. Chapter number 17, verse 20. And if you've noticed, gifts are truly significant when they are personal, when they are exclusive. Again, going back to that concept, if you're a person whose love language is gifts, you love receiving gifts, you know that the quality of a gift is heightened by the fact that it is something which is personal and exclusive. Now, some of us were very guilty of we're very guilty of just taking the coward's way out. I say myself included, and we give gift cards. And the more generic the gift card, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still accept gift cards myself, but I'm saying that the more thought and the more meaning that you put into giving a gift, the more personal that it feels, the more exclusive that it feels, the more that gift truly is a gift. And when you look at God's gifts that He has given us, every single one of us has at least one special, exclusive gift, something about us that nobody else has. And I'm not just talking about your DNA or your fingerprints. Some of us, we have the ability to express ourselves very, very eloquently. That's a gift that God has given us. Some of us, we have the gift of empathy, meaning that we can feel other people's feelings as if they are our own. Some of us, God has endowed us with the gift of compassion. What is compassion? Compassion is a level beyond empathy. It's not just feeling what other people are feeling. I was reading something that was describing the difference between compassion and empathy. And it said compassion is if you saw a boulder, a rock on top of someone, and you felt that person's pain. That's empathy. But compassion is that you feel that pain, and you also ask yourself, what can I do to get this person out of the situation? And that's why, more than just empathy, God has compassion with us. Meaning that if God finds us in a situation where we are stuck, God wants us to come out of that situation. God sends us signals in our life. If we're awake, we have our eyes open and our ears open and our heart is open, we can receive those signals so that He can move us out of the way of danger. So every single one of us is given a gift. The reason I talk about this is because, tonight we remember and we commemorate the legacy of Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. And this was a personality that was endowed with many different gifts. Gifts that were exclusive, and some titles that were bestowed upon her that were exclusive to her, and towards the end we'll go over some of those. But think about that idea of gift and how some of us have an exclusive gift. I want to share something. We're also commemorating the late mother of our dear brother Hajj Jafar Yassai and Mrs. Mirafati, who passed away. Was it last year? Only last year. And I want to share this with you. I knew Mrs. Yassai for 20 years maybe. And within those 20 years, I never had any deep, meaningful conversations with her. I didn't have the time to, not that I did, I never got the chance to sit down and actually converse with her and, ask her about it. Every time I saw her, it was just a few exchanges of a few sentences and words. But I remember she had a very, very special gift. And that gift that she had was bringing joy to people. I remember feeling very, very joyous around her, very happy around her. Even if it was just a, hello, how are you? How is your wife? How is your mother? How are you doing? That's all she needed to say in order to bring joy. And that was a special, from my perspective at least, I can say that that was a very, very special gift that God had endowed her with. Of course, those of you who knew her on a more intimate and personal level, you probably recognize much more than that. And that goes to show you that every single one of us, God has endowed us with a gift. So that brings us to the point where God tells us in another chapter, chapter number 4, verse 32, وَلَا تَتَمَنُّوا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Don't covet what God has favored some of you above others. Meaning that don't look at other people, and we mentioned this a few weeks ago, that the grass is not greener on the other side. Don't look at what other people have and say, well, I wish I had that person's output. I wish I had that person's capacity. I wish I had that person's personality, those gifts. Many times when our attention and our focus is on what other people have, we lose sight of the gifts, the personal gifts that God has endowed us with. And when you read the commentary about that verse, it's very interesting. It says that a group of women came to the Prophet, and there are multiple commentaries on this. One commentary says that a group of women went to the Prophet and they began complaining that, why is it that Islamic inheritance rules that men receive double what women receive? And, the men came back and they said, well, Ya Rasulullah, I mean, we're totally justified in that we have to go out and fight for war and our women don't have to do that. So we should receive not only double, but we should receive more than that. And this exchange took place where men began to covet what women had and women began to covet what men had. And in order to end that discussion, God says, stop coveting what each other have. Some of you have gifts that others will never have. And other people have gifts that you probably do not have. And when you focus on yourself, when you focus on the gifts that God has given you, you stop coveting and you stop worrying about what other people have or what other people don't have or what God has given you. And, I mention this because today really the hot topic when you look at politics and what's going on in the media and all of that is gender equality, right? And gender equality is described the following way. This is the definition. The state in which access to rights or opportunities is unaffected by gender. And really, if you study the whole concept of gender equality and why don't men have what women have and why don't women have what men have, and I'm not saying there's no truth to this discussion at all, but when you study it at its core, you find that those discussions became popular and they became common once we began to take God out of the equation and we began to compare ourselves to one another. And we forgot about what God had endowed each gender with. And that term, when you look at the term secularism, because that's when secularism was on the rise, that term secularism first appeared around 1851, and it coincided with the Industrial Revolution. And today in the Friday prayer we spoke about that, the Industrial Revolution, how masses started going to work, and you needed men to go into the factory, and by the time World War I and World War II, you needed women in the factory, and then people went home and they were confused, are we supposed to be home or are we supposed to be in the factory? And they started comparing themselves to one another. And that's because we lost sight and we forgot about everything that God has endowed us with as men and everything that God has endowed us with as women. And from that, it's very interesting because once people started discussing gender equality, then the idea of feminism and femininity and masculism and masculinity and all those, everything kind of just became discombobulated and into one and mixed into one. And now people are confused on gender identity and gender roles when it's all there. If you go back to the basics, God says, listen, we've gifted every single one of you with a gift that if you just focus on the gifts that we have granted you, you're going to stop coveting. You're going to stop wondering, why is this person given more? Or why am I given less? Or why was I given more? I wish I wasn't given this much because I wouldn't have to deal with this much. And a few weeks ago, if you remember, I mentioned that when we start looking, instead of our burdens, our responsibilities, instead of looking at them as burdens, but rather as a privilege, that God has privileged me with a family that I can take care of. God has privileged me with a home that I can maintain. God has privileged me with a business that is booming, that I have to run after and I have to take care of. When you start looking at what God has gifted us with as a privilege rather than a burden, that's when we begin to break through. That's when we truly can appreciate the gifts that God has given us. Now, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time speaking about this because I want to mention, I mentioned that Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, as we know, was a very, very gifted individual. And in those very, very short years that she lived, she was a mirror image of her father, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And today during the Friday prayer, I mentioned that one of the titles that she had been given by her father, among the many titles, was Bad'atun Nabi. Or he would say she was Bad'atun Minni, meaning that she was a part of my flesh. She was a part of who I was. And that she was a mirror image of the Prophet. In his generosity, in his knowledge, in his mercy, in his kindness, in his empathy and compassion. She was a mirror image of all of that. And it was interesting because that came out of left field. People didn't expect that because women at that time, daughters, were not held in that high of an esteem. I mean, you're talking about 7th century Arabia. Only a few years prior, families would bury their daughters alive because they saw their daughters as a burden, a financial burden. You have to find a spouse for her and you have to do this and that. And then radically, it shifts during the time of the Prophet, where God, to prove them wrong and to prove their behavior is wrong, He gifts the Prophet with a gift of abundance. And He says to him, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, that we have given you kawthar, which in Arabic means an abundance of an abundance. And that word comes from kathra, which means an abundance. But kawthar is even more of an abundance. That we have given you so much through this daughter of yours. And so one of those gifts that she had was basically condensed in the following attribute that the Prophet gave her. She was known as Ummu Abiha. Ummu Abiha means the mother of her father. No other person in history has been known, no other significant person in history has been known as Ummu Abiha, the mother of her father. And that's an attribute that the Prophet gifted her during his own lifetime. And she was a young woman during the lifetime of the Prophet, but in terms of her maturity and her motherly instinct, had reached such a level that the Prophet had considered her like his own mother. Because remember, the Prophet lost his mother Amina when he was very young. And so he went under the care of Halima Sa'diyah, the nursing lady, and then he considered Fatima bint Asad, who was the wife of his uncle Abu Talib, the mother of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He also considered her as his mother as well. And he would refer to her as Ummah, dear mother. And narrations told us that he wept when she passed away in Medina, and she was buried in Medina. For those of you who have had the chance to visit Medina, you would know that she, Fatima bint Asad, the mother of Imam Ali alayhi salam, is buried next to the 4 Imams. The 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th Imams there in Medina, in the Baqi' cemetery. And so he would refer to her as Ya Ummah. When Fatima bint Asad passed away, he said the following statement. He said that my mother has died today. My own mother has passed away. And when Fatima, his daughter, was born, he was constantly reminded of Fatima bint Asad. Because it said that Fatima, his daughter, even though there was no motherly relation between the two, she also mirrored the character and the attributes of Fatima bint Asad. And so, when it came to his daughter, he rediscovered the tenderness and the love that he was missing out for so many years. If you've ever, And I don't know what it's like, but when you lose a parent, when you lose someone who is dear and beloved to you, you feel like a part of you is missing. All the love and the tenderness that came with that person also goes missing. And it really doesn't matter how old you are. As old as we get, we always have an inner child within us that longs for his or her parents. And so the Prophet, it was so beautiful because with his daughter, that gift that God had given him, that abundance of good, part of that abundance of good was that he was able to rediscover the love and the affection that was lost when his mother passed away and when Fatima bint Asad passed away. And it's very interesting because, you know, when the Prophet bestows a name or when he bestows an attribute, you know, sometimes, and I mentioned this today during the Friday prayer, sometimes we give our kids and our grandkids certain nicknames or whatever, and it really doesn't have a meaning. It's because we're blindly in love with that person. So we'll give them nicknames and we'll call them by those nicknames, and, you know, to us they're significant, but to everyone else they're ridiculous. They have no meaning at all. But when the Prophet bestowed a name, God says, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Everything that he says is revelation, it's divinely inspired. And so when he refers to his daughter as Abiha, the mother of her father, understand the weight that it carries with it. He was not motivated only by his personal feelings, but by the outcome of his insightfulness into people's character and qualities. The Prophet, we know, had a certain insightfulness. Have you noticed those people that are closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have a certain insightfulness. They're able to see and detect people's characteristics. And because of that insightfulness into her character, he was able to label her as Abiha. And so, knowing how close Fatima Zahra alayhi salam was to the heart of the Prophet is very important, my friends. It reminds us of the significance of the gift that God bestowed the Prophet with. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. And that was a very, very specific gift at a time where men were considered the carriers of a legacy. And that chapter describes that. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ إِنَّ شَانِئَكَ هُوَ الْأَبْتَرُ. Truly it is your opponent, your foe. Because a man would stand at the door of the masjid in the path of the Prophet, and he would call him Abtar. Abtar means a person who is cut off. Because the Prophet had no surviving sons. He had a number of sons who died in their infancy. They were children when they passed away. And so in the eyes of the Arabs, well, he's cut off. He's not going to have a legacy. He's not going to have a surviving lineage. And God tells him, no, your surviving lineage, your abundance of good, your special gift that God has given you, can only be achieved by your daughter Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And of course, Fatima felt the same way about her father. She knew his significance in her life, and though she did not live for many years or many months after, and there's a dispute as to whether she lived for 75 days after the Prophet or 95 days. And of course that dispute is because in the Arabic script during those days there were no diacritic marks, so the word, the words for 60, 70 or 90, they look the same in the way that it is written without the diacritic marks, so that caused confusion. But regardless, whether it was 75 days, 95 days, however much it was, that wasn't really a long period of time to live after. And so, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, again, a woman not only of emotion, but a woman of intellect. And some would suggest, well, she's just emotional. She's just being emotional. Okay, well, if she's being emotional, why would God say, why would the Prophet say that God is satisfied for her satisfaction and he is angered for her anger? Is God also being an emotional person as well? There would be no meaning for God to say that. And those were the words of the Prophet, that when she's satisfied, God is satisfied. When she is angered, she is displeased, God is angered and displeased as well. And so I just want to share with you, and we'll finish with this, the sorrow that Fatima Zahra alayhi salam expressed for her father after he passed away. Narrations tell us that she would visit his grave and she would scoop a handful of dust from his grave in order to smell. And she would say, and I'll translate, ماذا على من شم تربة أحمد أن لا يشم مدى الزمان غواليا صبت علي مصائب لو أنها صبت على الأيام صرنا لياليا. What can be said to someone who has sniffed the soil of Ahmad and has resolved never to inhale the scent of any other fragrance? One calamity after another has rained down upon me in a matter that if this had befallen a day, it would have transformed it into night. And of course, we know about the incident of the door, and we know about the abuse and the mistreatment that took place. And some say it was not destined for Fatima Zahra alayhi salam to live in this world after her father passed away. That she was to be reunited with him, and that her wish was that she would be reunited. And that's how close she was with him, almost joined at the hip, that she wanted to be reunited with him. Ummu Abiha, the mother of her father. Imam Ali alayhi salam is also narrated to have wept for her. And you can imagine the suffering of Amir al-Mu'mineen after losing his beloved mentor and his beloved teacher, who was his father-in-law and who was everything to him. After losing him, he says the following words, and after losing her, he says the following words: with each intimate friend, there comes a time of disunion. Every intimate friend that we have, my friends, every intimate friend, there will be a time of firaq. There will be a time of disunion. There will be a time that we have to say our goodbyes, either us or either them first. With each intimate friend, there comes a time of disunion, and all suffering lesser than that is easy to bear. My loss of Fatima so soon after Ahmad is evidence that our most loved ones do not remain with this forever. I mean, if the idea is that if we're good, if we have that assumption that if we're good, people are going to stay with us, that assumption is shattered just by the fact that Imam Ali says that, look, how close was he with the Prophet and how close was he with Fatima that he would lose one 70 or 90 days after he lost the other. And so Imam Ali alayhi salam was very open about his grief. And, that represented, to see a man who was spiritually so strong. And we hear the stories of the strength of Imam Ali alayhi salam, that he was able to, with his normal size, not that he was big in any way physically, not that he could lift a certain amount of weight or anything like that. Narrations describe him as a man of a very normal posture and very medium height and very normal build. And we hear stories that he's able to rip out the door of Khaybar, which is a door that protects an entire city. However, when it comes to lifting the body of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, he has no power. Imagine spiritually what is happening to Imam Ali alayhi salam. And imagine spiritually what happens to the true followers and the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the intercession of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bestow those whom we are remembering tonight with His mercy and His forgiveness. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bestow us with His mercy and His forgiveness as well. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات إنك على كل شيء قدير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.